today's video, you will learn how to create a login and registration system fully in PHP. We will cover key features such as error handling and security to make your application ready to go. But before we get into the video, please leave a like and subscribe as it will help me out loads and it will also boost this video to other developers like yourself. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So in today's project, we'll be using a UI framework called DaisyUI. It's completely free to install and you can install it into your project using the CDN installation. But first, let's actually create our project. So head on over to VS Code and open up a folder. As you can see, I have already done that. And I'll create a new file, index.php. Then I'll use VS Code's little snippet where I can then quickly set up a HTML template. Title will be Login Register System. Now to install DaisyUI into our project, we're going to need another thing, Tailwind CSS. Tailwind CSS is also a sort of UI framework, but what it does is it lets you write CSS through writing class names. You can head on over to Tailwind CSS and have a look yourself. In my opinion, it is great and I use it for every project. So we'll be using it for this one as well, as DaisyUI supports it. So back to DaisyUI, we can then install it from our CDN by heading over to the CDN installation on their website and copying 2 lines of code. Back in our project, inside of our head tag, we can paste these 2 lines of code in, and now we successfully got the CDN installed. So to test that, I'll quickly make a navbar. So nav, which will have a class of navbar, and a background base of 100. Then we'll have a div. In this div, we'll have a class. This class will be navbar start. Here we'll have an anchor tag. href will be our index.php page. Class will be button, because we want to make a button. Button ghost, it's the ghost variant of our button. Text XL. And here I'll put home. Then I'll have another div. This time it will be class navbar end. And I'll have a link or another anchor tag for login. href at the moment will be just a hashtag. Class will have button and button ghost again. So then let's see how that looks inside of our browser. First though, I need to start my exam server. So I'll start the Apache server and I'll start the MySQL server. Both green, we're good to go. So I'll type in localhost /PHP mini course, which is the folder that I called it. And as you can see, we have this navbar. It's hard to see, so let's quickly change the background of our body to BG base 200. Reload. Now the reason we are not seeing it is because I forgot to set the body to take up the whole height of the app. At the moment, the whole app is pretty much just a navbar. So if we set a background color, the navbar is kind of above it, so it doesn't show. To make the body, or our contents of the website, take up the whole browser window, we could do it simply by typing min h screen. It says the min height will be 100% of the vertical height. So if you reload, now as you can see, it's very faint, but the color has changed on the background, because now we're taking up the whole of the browser window. Now while we're here, let me add another anchor tag, which will be for our sign up button. This one I'm going to make button neutral. This means our button will be now black. I also want to add a little bit of space in between. So space x2, which adds just a little bit of space between the 2 elements. Refresh, and I can see there's a little bit of space. Perfect. I'd say that's our navbar done for now. So the next thing we want to do is actually create our database, a database table where we'll store our users. Then we'll create a connection to the database inside of our project. So then we can get to working on the registration and logging in of users. So we'll head on over to localhost /PHP MyAdmin, where we'll be managing our database tables. If you've watched any of the previous videos on my channel, you would have learned how to create a database table, and how to connect it to your project. If not, you can follow along. I recommend you check out those videos because we go in depth about databases and connections. For now, let's just work with what we've got. So I already have a database here, PHP mini course. If you want to create a new one, click new up here. I don't really have a table in here, but that's fine. A database can store multiple tables. We'll just create another table and then we'll use that table within our project. So down here, when it says create a new table, I'll create a new table. I'm going to call it users. Number of columns. Let's have a look. Let's see what I want my users to have. Well, they'll have an ID, they'll have a name, they'll have an email, and they'll have a password. But good practice is also to have a created at. So that's 5 columns that we need. So I'll just change that to 5. Create. Name. The first one, as I mentioned, will be ID. I'll keep this as int. Then all we need to do for this one is change the index to be our primary key. This will be the unique identifier for each of the rows. So each user will have a different ID. And to make sure that they have a different ID, we'll use MySQL's auto increment feature, which is this checkbox here. This means that it will automatically increment the ID for us, which means we do not have to manage the ID. Then for the next column, I said I wanted to have a name. More specifically, I want to have a username. The type will be a varchar, the length will be 255, and then we don't need to worry about anything else. The next thing I said I wanted was an email. This will be another varchar of 255. And finally, a password, which will be a varchar 255. And make sure it is varchar of 255, because we'll be encrypting our passwords. Therefore, whatever the user inputs will be turned into a hashed string, which takes up the length of 255. And then finally, created at. I'll set this to a date and time. Default value will be current timestamp. This means that MySQL will automatically manage the created at column, which means we don't have to worry about it inside of our project. So the only 3 columns that we're going to manage are username, email, and password. That looks good to me. So just click save. And here we have a whole structure of our database. Exactly what we wanted. Everything looks good. So then let's head on back to our project and let's get to actually connecting to our database inside of our PHP project. I'll create a new file called database.php, which will manage the connection for us. I'll create a class called database, which will have a property, string property of our server name, which by default for me is localhost. We'll have another property, which will be the DB name, which for me was PHP mini course. We'll have another property, which will be the username for our database connection, which for me by default is root. And I will have another property, which will be password. For me, that's empty. Then let's create the function that will connect to our database for us. So I will not make this public. I'll make it private function connect. I'll add a try block, which will catch any PDO exceptions. And we'll exit the program by saying database connection failed. And then we can also append message we get. So get message. If you didn't get from our PDO exception, we are going to be using a PDO connection, which is a type of connection that lets us connect to a MySQL database. So before we get to doing that, I forgot to do one more property, which is a private PDO con. This is where our connection to our database will be stored. So then later on, inside of this class, we're able to perform database functions. So then let's get to connecting. This con, we're going to be setting it to a new PDO. And then for the DSN, it'll be MySQL host, which is going to be inside of these brackets, which also means I need to make sure that these are double quotes, not single quotes, because we're going to be using PHP's templating. This server name, as you can see down there, DB name, which again will be this DB name. Whoops. Let me close this over, it's kind of annoying. Then we just need to specify this username, and then this password. Then we can set attributes, this con set attribute, and we'll add PDO attr underscore error mode and PDO error mode exception. And with that, we have now got our function to connect. But how do we call this function if it's private? This is where we'll use our constructor. So public function underscore construct will call this connect. This means anytime we create an instance of our database, it will automatically create that connection for us. Perfect, that's our database class done. Let's get to managing and creating users. That means we'll start off with working on the sign up page where we'll have registration logic. So I'll create a new file called signup.php. Close this off again. And we'll start off by creating a new HTML template. And I'll say here, sign up. So let's get to styling and making a nice, beautiful registration form. We'll start off by saying min h screen. Again, I want to take up the whole browser window. Then we'll set the background base to 200 again. We'll also add flex and flex col. Then we'll open up main tags. We'll give it a class flex, flex1, item center, justify center, and padding x of 4. This will pretty much just center whatever is the contents in the center of our browser view, which obviously will be a card where the user can input their details and then submit a form. I'll create a div. This div will have a class of card, which comes from our DaisyUI. Width, it will take up the full width. Max width small. Background base of 100. And we'll add a shadow XL. Then we'll add another div. Class. Here we'll have card body. Whatever is inside of here will be in our card body. We'll add a h2 tag, which will be our card title. We'll justify its center, and we'll make the text to XL. And then inside of here, we can put something like get started. Of course, you can put whatever you want in here, like register, sign up. I'm just going to say get started. Then I'll add a p tag, which have a class of text center, text small, text base content -60. Then as the contents, I'll say register your new account. So let's see how that looks. If we go back to our website, refresh and click sign up. Oh, we forgot to change the href. If we go back here, we'll change the href to our new signup.php file. Refresh, sign up. There you go. But you see, none of our styling is here. It is because we've got to add the DaisyUI and Tailwind CSS into our new page. So let's copy these two. Copy, go to sign up and paste. Reload. Oh, that's much better. Of course, our navbar is gone. So let's import that. We'll copy this and we'll paste it above the main. Refresh, and there you go. Cool. So let's carry on working on our form. So now we'll open up some form tags. Here we'll add method of post and an action, which we'll get back to in a second. We'll create a div with a class of form-control. We'll give it a margin top of 4. Then inside we'll add a span with a class of label-text, and we'll say username. And then below we'll create our input. And just put this like this. Type will be text. The name will be username. The placeholder let's just do account123. And then the class will be input and input dash bordered. Then back over here, you can see we have our username label and our input. Great. Now let's create the rest of the inputs. We can easily do this by just copying this div that we created above here and pasting it below. This time, instead of username, we'll have email. The type in our input will be email. The name will be email. The placeholder, let's do account@example.com. And then the class will stay the same. Let's do another input. This time, we'll have password, the type of password, name of password, and a placeholder of, let's just put a couple asterisks. And one final thing that I want to do is a password verify. So password, or maybe verify password, type of password, the name though will be verify password, just like that. And then at the bottom, to finish it all off, we'll add a button. The type will be of submit. The class will be button, button neutral, margin top of 6, and width of full. And the text inside, let's just do sign up. Great, let's go back and see how that looks. Refresh, and there we go. We have a very modern and clean register form. Another cool thing that we can do at the bottom, which is always quite nice, and you see it on most modern websites, is a link for the user to click on in case they already have an account. So they clicked on sign up, but they already have an account. So they can click on login below. So let's do that quickly. I'll create a p tag, give it a class of text center, text of small, and a margin top of 4. Inside of here, let's put a text of already have an account, question mark. Then we can add an anchor tag with a href. At the moment, it'll be going nowhere. With a class of link dash primary, and the text will be log in. Let's go back. There it is. Already have an account. Login. I think login should be one word, just like this. There you go. Better. Our form is now complete. Now let's make it actually function. So at the top of our form, we have the action that we left as empty. I'm going to make the action go to a folder, our script folder, where inside we'll have a file that manages all the data and creates the user. So script/register user.php. Then in here, I'll create a new folder called script and a new file called register-user.php. We can open up our PHP tags. So in here, first we'll check if the request method was a post. So if $_server request method is post, then we'll run whatever's inside of this block. First, let's validate our inputs. Make sure they're not empty. So we'll do if empty from our post. And let's see what I called it. We've got username, email, password, and verified password. So we've got username. Let me just put these on new lines so it'll be a bit easier to read. Or empty post email, or empty post password, and finally, or empty post verify password. So if any of these is true, so meaning one of our inputs is empty, I want to send the user back to the sign up page where we'll also display an error. So to send them back, we'll send a header, a location, and what I call it, sign up.php. But of course we're in the script folder, so we need to go back one directory and then exit the script. But how are we going to display the errors? Well, this is where I'll use sessions. So I'll start a session at the top of this file, and above this header function, so before it gets executed, we'll say session error is equal to empty input brackets s, because it could be multiple inputs that are also empty. Great, that's the first validation done. Now let's store all of these inside of variables. So I'm going to say username is equal to, from our post, username. Our email is equal to, from our post, our email. Our password is from our post, password. And our verify password is from our post. Oh, typing is not it today. Verify password. Cool. So let's see what kind of validation we need to do. We've got a username, which we allow to be anything. Our email, well, we need to validate and make sure that's a valid email. So let's do that. If not filter var, our email is filter validate email, then we'll do the same thing as we did up here. So we'll copy that and paste it in here. I'll say invalid email. Cool. Then the next thing we want to verify is our password. So we've got our password and we also want to verify our password. So first we've got to make sure they match. Luckily, this is very simple. If password is not equal to verify password, then we'll send the user back with an error saying invalid. Oh, maybe passwords don't. I need to do one of these backslashes here if I want to do an apostrophe. Passwords don't match. Of course, we could do extra stuff, like making sure that the password has at least one capital letter and it's at least 8 characters long. So let's actually do that. So before the password verify, I think it's more of an appropriate place to put this. So we check if len of our password is less than 8, we'll send the user back with another error, such as password must be more than 8 characters. Great. So now when we reach this part of our code, it means that all of our data is valid, which means we can then create our user. So obviously we're going to be doing it with our database, but we don't have a function to actually create a user yet. So let's head on over to our database file and create a function that will let us create the user. So public function, I'll say create user, where we pass in the username, the email, and the password. This will return a boolean. And as we're actually doing strongly typed here, let me actually specify that this should be a string, so should this, and so should this. To create a user with our PDO collection, it's actually very simple. So first, let's create our query, which will be insert into, and then our table, which for me was users, where we pass username, email, and password, the values of our username, our email, and our password. Then we'll create a statement which will say this con prepare, and we'll prepare our query. Then we'll execute it. So statement, execute, and we'll pass in our parameters, which is anything that has a colon prefix here. So key value pair, username, which will be from our parameters, username, email, which will be from our parameters, our email, and finally our password, which will be from our parameters, password. Now I'm returning a boolean, but I'm not returning anything here. And I want to return true on success and false on failure. So if you hover over execute, you can see it returns true on success or false on failure, which is exactly what we want. Therefore, I can put a return right over here. Perfect. This is our function complete. So we head on over to register user. We can now register a user. And I noticed that I put our database outside of our script. So I'm going to just drag that into our scripts directory. So require once our database file. We'll create a new database connection, which will be new database. And as you remembered, this automatically connects to the database because of our constructor. We're calling the connect function here. Then I'll get the result, which will be db create user. We'll pass in the username, we'll pass in the email, but we don't want to pass in the password just yet, even though it is valid and this does work, but we haven't actually hashed our password, which means anyone that gets access to our database gets access to all of the passwords in raw text. This is a very bad practice. We need to hash it. So let's do that right over here. I'm going to create a new variable called hashed password, and we'll use PHP's password hash function, which will pass in our password and password. Let's do default, which is the default algorithm. Now we can pass in our hashed, where is it? Our hashed password into our function parameters. As you remember, we return true on success, false on failure, which means we can run an if statement. I'll check if our result failed, which means we got false. I'll send the user back to our sign up, and I'll say error creating user. Else, I'll send the user back again, but this time, instead of it being an error, we'll have a success. And the successful message will be created user successfully. But now I don't want to go back to sign up because the user is already signed up. They don't need to sign up again. So we'll go to our index. Great. But finally, to finish up this file, what if someone accesses this file by typing it in the URL, so therefore it's not a post request? It will just display nothing. We want to send the person back to our index.php page or whatever page we specify. So one final thing here, we'll add an else where we'll copy this. We don't need to specify an error message, I don't think, but do as you want. Location to, let's do sign up. If someone's trying to access the sign up script, they probably want to sign up. So we'll take it back to signup.php. And with that, our file is now complete. So let's test it out and let's also handle our errors because we have all these errors in our session now in case something fails. So now we need to actually display these errors to the user to let them know that there was an error. So then back in our sign up form, let's say at the top above the inputs. So above our form, I'll add a span, which will then display our error. I'll give it a class name of text small text-error. But now we need to check if we actually have an error. So we'll open up a PHP tag and we'll say if session error. Oh, sorry, we need to say if is set our session error. Then we execute whatever's in here. I'll use this PHP wrapper thingy, which pretty much just lets us write code like this. Oh, sorry, not else. End if. So what this does, if you've ever seen it before, usually if we would display something, we would usually put an echo. We would have it in one PHP tag and put echo and surround this in quotes. With PHP though, you can do something like this, where you can surround a bit of code, a bit of HTML, with PHP tags like this. For example, this if block, if with a colon and an end if, it pretty much displays this as regular HTML if this condition is true. So it completely eliminates the use of echo, and it also allows for syntax highlighting. As if you use an echo, you're just typing raw string. This actually allows for syntax highlighting, which is just more of a developer experience thing. It also just allows for, in my opinion, easier code readability. So then, instead of our error, we now have access to the error. But now we can't do something like this, because obviously we're not in PHP tags anymore, we're in HTML. So we can echo it out. But I'm going to use the PHP shorthand for echoing, which is putting an equal sign. This is exactly the same as putting PHP echo. So, saves us a couple characters. So I'll just be using it here. There you go. Now, what if we actually created the account? Well, we have in our session a success key with a message, but it takes us back to index.php. So we kind of need to do a similar thing. So inside of here, underneath the navbar, I'll open up my PHP tag and I'll do the same thing. If is set session, but this time success, PHP end if, in a span, class, text small, and text dash success, where we'll then echo out our message. So session, not error, sorry. Success. There we go. Perfect. And that's now done. But you probably noticed, okay, we're displaying it, fine. But then the error is constantly inside of our session. Obviously, when we display it once, we don't need it again. Same with the success message. So how can we do that? Well, we can open up our PHP tags here and say unset session success. I'll copy this over and I'll paste it inside of our signup. Of course, this time changing it to error. Now if you're reading this, you're probably like, well, you could have just done it all inside of PHP tags. You don't need all this extra colon, end if stuff. Yes, of course. But I wanted to show you this because a lot of people seem to forget about it. This is a really cool way, in my opinion, of writing PHP. Now we've got that unset, the error is displayed, and then it's gone. Perfect. So that looks good to me. But we send our user back to index.php and say created user successfully. With this logic, the user still needs to go back and click the login button and then log in again. That sounds a bit silly, doesn't it? We can either send the user to the login form instead, or we can just log them in straight away. So to do that, I'll store the user's information inside of our session. So while we're doing sessions here, we'll do session is, let's do user logged in. We'll set that to true. And then what else would we want? I probably want to transfer over the username, which will be the username we got above. Of course, you can add the email. For now, I'm just going to store this. As for this application, that's all I'm going to be needing to store and display. Now to check if we actually have correctly been logged in, I will add these PHP tags here, which will say if is set, again from our session, is user logged in, and make sure that our user session username is also set. Then inside of here, I will display the username. Therefore, let's do a nice big text, class text dash 5XL and font dash bold. And I'll say welcome. And then we'll do our PHP echo of our session username. Great. But what if the user isn't logged in? Let's also show that. Let's also just show something for that. So we can then do PHP else. Forgot to put the colon here. And let's put another H1. Class, again, we'll have text 5XL, font dash bold, and we'll say welcome with an exclamation mark. And then below, let's change this to a H3, because we'll be changing this to text 3XL, font semi-bold. And I'll say, please log in or register. Great. Let's see how that looks. So I go to our home, welcome, please log in or register. So if I click sign up, let's create an account, a valid account. Let's do test at example.com with a password of password. Sign up. Great. But why does it still say this? Well, I forgot to add a session start. So session start to make sure we can actually access our session. So let's check if we also have it here. Oh, we do not have it here either. So let's add it up here as well. Session start. Over here, let's see if we've got it. Yes. And that's all we need. Let's reload. And there we go. Created user successfully. And if I reload it again, it goes away because we unset the session after we display it. And welcome test, which is our username. Perfect. Let's make that look a little bit nicer because at the moment it's in the top left. It doesn't look that nice. So I'll add a main, and inside of here, I'll put all of this logic. I'll put a class of flex1, flex col, items center, and justify center. So reload. Now to make it centered, we need to change this to flex and flex col. Reload. There we go. Now it's in the center. So another thing you probably noticed, in the top right, we have login and sign up, even though we're already logged in. So let's change that and add a logout button. So inside of our nav bar, we can see we don't actually do any logic to check if the user's logged in. So we can add, So we can add a PHP tag. Actually, we can copy this line over here, as it'll be almost the same. So we'll paste it here. If this set user's logged in, and we don't really care about the username, we just want to check if they are logged in, then we'll display something. Else, we'll display whatever we've got here. And of course, we need to end if. So, if the user is not logged in, it'll display our login and sign up buttons. But if they are, I'm going to copy and paste it over here. I'm going to say logout button. And let's change this from ghost to neutral. Refresh. Oh, we have an error because I forgot to put PHP over here. That is my bad. PHP. Refresh. There we go. And we've got a logout button. Of course, this logout button does nothing at the moment, so let's add that functionality. So inside of our script /logout.php, now let's create that file, logout.php, PHP tags, and this is very simple. We'll do if is set our session user logged in and is set session user username to make sure that they are actually logged in. We'll then unset the session user logged in, and let's paste that down here and say user username. And then finally at the end here we'll go header, location, let's go back one to index.php. Perfect. Let's refresh the website and see if this works. Log out. Well, something refreshes, but we still have our username. Oh, looks like I forgot another session start at the top. Reload, log out, and there we go. Welcome, please log in or register. Great. So that's that done. Now let's create our final form, which will be our login form. Luckily, we've already got the sign up form, which has got everything that we really need for a login form. So we'll create a new form, login.php. We'll let's copy everything from sign up, everything, paste it into login. We'll change the title to say login. Then let's have a look. Let's see, we've got get started. Let's say welcome back. Log in to your account. And then we'll allow users to log in with their email and password. So we'll get rid of username. We'll keep first password. We don't need to verify the password. Change the button to login and say don't have an account, and we'll go to sign up, which we already have. So we can do sign up.php. Amazing. That should be everything. Or is it? First, we've got to make sure that we're actually going to a different URL. We'll do login user.php. If I reload, click on login, nothing happens because I still haven't changed the navbar. But the navbar's a bit old here, isn't it? It's not the same one as our index. So let me quickly change it here to login.php and copy this whole navbar. Then let's go to login, paste it in here, and also in sign up, because we haven't changed it in here either. Paste. Now if I refresh, click login, we get a welcome back with our email input and our password. Great. So then let's create the login script. Login.php. And again, I'll copy all the contents of the register script. So copy and paste. Also, while I'm here, I'm pretty sure I called this login user. Yes, so got to rename this file to login user. Nice. Now let's go through it. We've got checking our inputs. We don't have a username. We don't have a verified password. We don't have a username. We don't have a verified password. We validate that it's correct email. We validate that the length of the password is more than 8. Or it's at least 8 characters. We don't have a password verifier. We don't need to hash. And then we get to here. But you can see we run db create user. We don't want to create a user. We want to fetch a user. So this is where we'll go into our database file and we'll create a new function to fetch a user by their email. So public function fetch by email, where we'll specify a string email. I'm not going to specify a return type because it is mixed. Of course, you still can. Nothing wrong with me typing mixed here, but I'll show you what this looks like. We'll create our SQL query, select star from our users table where email is equal to the email. Then we'll create a statement, which will be this con prepare our statement or our SQL query. Then we'll execute our query. So statement execute, pass in the parameter email is our parameter email. And then we return our statement fetch, which gets the data, and will fetch with the mode of PDO fetch assoc. Now if we look on fetch, you can see down here the return value of this function on success depends on the fetch type. In all cases, false is returned on failure. That means we can't really tell exactly what is going to get returned, but we know false gets returned if something fails. And when something fails, it will most likely mean that our user doesn't exist. So if you go back to login user, now we can change this to db fetch by email, pass in an email. We'll check if the result is false. We can now say user not found and send it back. Now we've got the result, and the result is, if it was successful, is our data as a key value pair, meaning the column name is the key and the value is the actual value of that column. So with that information, we need to validate our password. So I'll put here, we can actually get rid of this else, as we don't really need it because we exit the script anyway over here. But we'll check if password verify, because remember, the user inputs a string password, the password in our database is hashed. So we're going to need to somehow compare them to make sure that they match. This is where password verify comes in. So we'll pass in the password that the user put in, and then we'll get from our result the password column. Then we'll actually flip the logic. So if it failed, which means the user did not enter a correct password, we'll send it back with an error saying password invalid. Of course, this is quite descriptive. Usually you want to have something a little bit less descriptive, like invalid details. You don't really want to tell them what's wrong. But for the sake of this tutorial, we'll just have password invalid. So then, when we're at the end of this block over here, the user inputted data is correct and there is a user associated with it. So then we can log them in. So all of this can work. But how is we getting the username as it doesn't exist? Well, if you remember, our result also stores our username. So we can say result username. Great. That is everything done. But if you scroll this file, you can see we're going back to sign up. We want to go back to login now. So I'm going to edit all of these quickly. To do this in VS Code, you can click wherever you want your cursor to start. And if you hold Alt and click somewhere else, like here, for example, now you can see I've got 2 cursors. Now I've got 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, missed that one, 6. So I can then quickly change all of this to login. Perfect. Now it all goes to login.php, except for this one, which takes us to index. Now we're getting an error somewhere, which is really confusing because I don't know how. Oh, over here, we accidentally put an or. Well, we didn't accidentally put it. We got rid of our final check. Anyways, now we've got some underlines. Let's have a look. Create user, it's missing an argument. That's another one of my mistakes. This should be fetched by email. There you go. Not create user. Amazing. All right, so now let's see if everything works. Let's refresh this page and go back to our database. If I go to browse, I've got one user with a username of test. The password is hashed, so let's hope I can remember it. If not, we'll just create another user. So, oh, sorry, it's email, not username. My bad. But test@example.com, and I'm pretty sure the password is password. Sorry, I just noticed what I've done here. Login up. I mean, yeah, if you want to have that, you can have that, but I'm pretty sure it should just be login. Refresh. There you go. Okay. Test at example.com with password as our password. Login. We get created user successfully. Now, why are we getting that? This is an incorrect message. Well, it's because we didn't change our message. Here it should say logged in successfully. Obviously, it'll go away now because it's been unset. But let's quickly test it out. Test at example.com with our password, login, and there we go, login successful. Perfect. And a welcome test, which is our username. So our login works, our account registration works, and our logout button works. Great. Everything works as it should. And you also have this beautiful UI through the help of Tailwind CSS and DaisyUI. Now let's quickly do some basic error handling. For example, if I click sign up now, we get empty inputs. Perfect, our error messages work. But I don't really like how that's styled. It's a bit to the left, I want it to be in the middle. Easily change that. And I know it'll be the same for our login page because, oh, was this our sign up? Yes, so it will be the same for our login and sign up because they are the same. I copied them over. So then let's have a look. In our error, we have text error, but we don't have text center. Same in our login. Where is it? Text center. Perfect. Refresh will be gone. Click sign up. Now it's in the middle. Another thing that we can do is add client-side validation. Because at the moment, as you can see, we're submitting the form and this is coming back from our PHP script. Nothing wrong with that. But we also want some client-side validation. So what we can do, let's start with our login. Our email, that's fine. Let's close this actually, make it a bit easier to read. Then our password, min, set that to 8 characters. And also required. That's another thing we could do with our email actually. Add required. Perfect. Then in our sign up, let's also do that. So our username, make this required. Email, make it required. Our password, min of 8 and required. Our password verify will also be required. And let's also put min of 8. So then let's go back here and refresh. If I click sign up now we have client-side errors. So let's put something here. Invalid email. And then password must be more than 8 characters. This should be min length and not in a string. And before I just had min. So now if we refresh, type in something like test at hello.com and a password of 123 and a verified password 123. If you click sign up, please lengthen this text to 8 characters or more. You are currently using 3 characters. That means Google Chrome is now displaying this error. Of course, on different browsers, this might look different. I'm using Google Chrome, so that's what I see. And of course, if someone was malicious and they went into our elements, clicked on our input, like our password, and changed the min length to nothing. Same with our verified password. And click sign up. The password must be more than 8 characters. That's coming from our PHP backend. And with that, I'd say we are complete. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to see more content like this, let me know in comments what you want to see. With that, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.